My great friend and colleague Bernie Siegel, who runs an organization that is really making a huge difference to what we do in this field in terms of advocacy. Bernie, please come to the stage. And I have a feeling he's on his way. Here he is.
Making a grand entrance.
Take it away.
Okay, thank you. Well, hello, everyone. My background is law, but you will find out that law is the ultimate backstage pass. So what we're going to talk about is a lofty ideal. Seizing the moment. Health span is a fundamental human right. Why should we call it a human right? Healthy longevity. What's going to capture the public's imagination? How is this field and the longevous community fit in, and how is it going to get its message across? How are we going to get the science to advance? Well, we're going to talk about that and talk about the toolkit that advocates need to succeed. So I am a stem cell advocate. I am a lawyer, and I was involved in building at a conference called the World Stem Cell Summit that brought 22 years of patience, working with scientists, working with business in the field of regenerative medicine, with the politicians to create a global movement to make stem cells reality. So about 2.5 years ago, I was having a chat with my friend Aubrey de Grey. Now, I met Aubrey at Cambridge, or actually met him in the US. Many years ago, I was invited to speak at Cambridge, and he made sense to me. But that was when the back of the book cover of his book, Ending Aging, someone said, this is a man that should be put in jail. Instead of putting him in jail, every single year I would invite him to give a talk at the World Stem Cell Summit. So in talking to Aubrey, I was saying, you know, Aubrey, there needs to be more patience, more of society behind the longevity movement. And as we talked, it convinced me that if there was some funding, I told him that we would be able, my organization with the help of some others, to be able to put together a global coalition to support longevity and health span. And Aubrey is the beard that launches 100 projects or 1,000 projects. So sure enough, with the support of the Longevity Escape Velocity Foundation, the support of the Regenerative Medicine, we now have 275 organizations around the world that are part of something called the Health Span Action Coalition. You can see the logos of many of those organizations, like the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation, the Diabetes Research Institute Foundation, Dr. Atala and the Wake Forest Institute for Regenerative Medicine, patient groups, funders, companies. I think 11 presentations at this meeting are companies, even a George Church-inspired company, that are part of this coalition. My organizations, the Regenerative Medicine Foundation, the World Stem Cell Summit, and the Health Span Action Coalition are united in support of scientific research. Evidence, scientific research. Now, how did I get involved with this? This is the short version. We'll see my TEDx for more. Many years ago, before anyone in Gen Z was around, in 2002, a group claimed they cloned a baby. It was the Raelian movement, a UFO sect. And they made this announcement in Broward County, Florida, an area from Miami, where I practice law. And this had captured the fear factor in the world. The cloning was around the corner, and it was something that was being hijacked by the Right to Life movement in the United States and the debate over abortion. So these cloners, these would-be cloners, were being thrust on the public, and they were trying to ban other forces. We're thrusting groups like this on the public. The cloning is a sledgehammer word. These people are involved, and it's going to involve embryonic stem cell research, and we shouldn't have embryonic stem cell research. Well, I challenged them in court, and in 30 days burst the bubble and was invited to join the stem cell scientists of the world at their first meeting. And there I became in league with them and became the de facto lawyer of the field. So I'm going to talk about a context for all of this. And when as a student, actually, an undergraduate at the University of Miami, 50 years ago, a real bygone era, I was 8 years old then, Future Shock, the book Future Shock by Alvin Toffler was a bestseller. Some of you may have heard of it. And just to put a little bit in context of where we should be thinking about this, his first chapter was called The 800th Lifetime. And I'm just going to read this short paragraph. It has been observed, for example, in the last 50,000 years of man's existence, if they were divided into lifetimes of approximately 62 years each, there have been about 800 such lifetimes. Of the 800, fully 650 were spent in caves. Only during the last 70 lifetimes has it been possible to communicate effectively from one lifetime to another, as writing made it possible to do. Only during the 6 last lifetimes did masses of men ever see a printed word. Only during the last 4 has it been possible to measure time with any precision. Only in the last 2 years has anyone anywhere used an electric motor, and the overwhelming majority of all material goods that we use in daily life today have been developed in the present 800th lifetime. Well, just from the 70s to 2025, think of the advances in technology. But here's the main point of Toffler. Now imagine not merely an individual, but an entire society, an entire generation, including its weakest, least intelligent, and most irrational members, suddenly transported into this new world. The result is mass disorientation, future shock on a grand scale. This is the prospect that man now faces. Change is avalanching upon our heads, and most people are grotesquely unprepared to cope with it. Do you agree with that? I think that's true. I think that's true. So how are the immortalists, how are the people who are part of this organization, this field, the scientists, how are they to be able to get what is needed to be able to move the field forward when people have their own cultures and their own religions and their own beliefs? And how can healthy longevity can be delivered to all populations? Well, there's an answer to that, and I'm going to talk about it as we talk about this. So I was speaking at an event in Rome called the World Congress for Freedom of Scientific Research. And I was in the Campo di Fiori, beautiful little square there, and there's a statue. And I walked up to the statue and I see that's where Bruno was burned at the stake in the Inquisition. So what did Bruno believe? Bruno, ahead of his time, he believed that there might be stars that are suns. He believed that there might be planets like Earth. In other words, he believed in astronomy. So let the record be straight. I support vaccines, I support hygiene, and I support astronomy. Are you going to burn me at the stake? No. None of you are going to get burned at the stake. So what is the worries that are around? Why should people be concerned about radical life extension? What's going to be thrown as thumbtacks out of an ambulance and so you won't be able to advance? Well, we have to look at what has gone wrong with the idea of creating better humans. There's this great book, The Immortalist, Charles Lindbergh and Alexis Carrel and their daring quest to live forever. But what the specter is of that book, and the message is eugenics. And if there's one book I'm going to recommend for you, it's War Against the Weak, Eugenics and America's Campaign to Create a Master Race by Edwin Black. It's so shocking that in the last century, not that long ago, a past lifetime ago, that people were sterilized if they were deaf. People were sterilized basically if they were mentally ill. And it was supported by the Supreme Court of the United States in a decision, something along the lines of 6 generations of imbeciles are enough. How times have changed. In the worst case scenario of what can emerge, and it's a shot of the defendants in the Nuremberg trial. So that's a real horrible specter. Don't you think that anything that is done, anything that might be said at this meeting, they're going to raise the flag, wait, It's too much. Only certain people are going to get this. Not a farmer in Malawi. He's not going to get this. An eighth of the world or a sixth of the world lives in grinding poverty. How many lifetimes are they going to have in that? What good is extending their life for 1,000 years or more? So we have to think about that in the messaging that we have. And the analogy, of course, is stem cells. Because stem cells were being foisted or being attacked as cloning, a specter that was scary. And the stem cell wars, of which I and my colleagues were very involved with, were fighting laws that weren't funding this nascent research, a cure for all diseases, the whole idea of cell therapies. Well, we made our mark, I should say, in the United Nations. The Vatican and the Bush administration was trying to ban a form of embryonic stem cell research called therapeutic cloning for all time by world treaty to morally condemn it. And it was being jammed down the United Nations. I was fortunate enough to lead the patient movement and the movement that faxed 35,000 fax letters to the UN, presented. I met with Christopher Reeve 6 months before he died. We gave a statement to the United Nations. We created a scientific meeting for the United Nations. We saved the research and the legal committee by a single vote. By a single vote. I had been 18 months as an advocate. 18 months as an advocate. So you can't, and believe me, I was not a person that thought I was going to be in this. I got a lot of publicity out of that cloning case. But the bottom line is I'm a cancer survivor myself at age 48. I'm knock on wood, as they say, I'm 75 now, I'm fine. But at that point in my life, I knew if an opportunity came, I would take it. And I took it, and this is where we are. So we are in a world of nation states, world of nation states. And we have to remember that because we have to influence policy. And small nations matter. The World Health Organization matters. How do we influence the states and the power of government to be able to support the science enterprise and to pass regulations or to improve regulations to keep up with innovation? How are we going to fund workforce development for the biotechnological workforce to be able to do a pipette? It's a bottleneck. We're trying to solve that. How are we going to convince people that this is the most important project in the world? You have to have narrative. And with narrative, you can control things. The cell therapy industry is this famous paper from Dr. Chris Mason. Some of you know him. He is a member of our Science Advisory Board. And he pointed out in 2011, and talking about the future billion-dollar regenerative medicine industry, that cell therapies did not have an infrastructure. Pharmaceuticals, biologics, medical devices, but not cell therapies. How are we going to build the infrastructure? Well, we barely have started on building the infrastructure, but we are doing it, for better or worse. Now, I don't think personally cutting the roots of the NIH, perhaps the greatest engine of scientific progress in the history of our species, I don't think that's such a good idea. But there are other things that we can do to have realistic regulations so that we can advance cell therapies and gene therapies. That's a necessity. My hero is Christopher Reeve. I was invited to Bedford, New York, where I brought up a film crew 6 months before he died. It changed my life forever. He was my Superman, and I played that video for the United Nations, then we played it a second time at a press conference for the United Nations. We built a global movement for stem cell research, as you see, and that movement created the $5.5 billion last ballot initiative with my colleague Melissa King, who's my partner in the HealthSpan Action Coalition. $15 billion of taxpayer money, Prop 76, and Prop 14. I was on the board of Prop 14, and the public voted for that. How can we create an institute around the world? These are the tools: finance, collaboration, subject matter, communications, and law. These are the toolkit. I will gladly speak to you after. We can talk about how it's done. But this organization and the 275 organizations, soon to be 400 and 500, are united. You can join, and it doesn't cost anything. We leverage those tools to create an institute, one of a kind. Now we're working on something called the Thrive Act to give incentives so companies can put their data in to the FDA and get approved, not as a regulatory mandate, but as an incentive. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did and never will. Frederick Douglass, public sentiment is everything. With public sentiment, nothing can fail. Without it, nothing can succeed. I was not burned at the stake, but with George Church and Peter Diamandis, I was asked to speak at the Vatican under the creation of Adam, and every pope turned over in his grave. This is the narrative. It's people, it's children that are dying. Thank you, and that's the link to our website.